I want you to be the healthcare futurist for me. Now, this morning we heard from Jeff, but all of us are healthcare futurists as well. What are your predictions? Do you see more or less change in the next 13 years? More. I think that's a pretty simple answer. Do you think it's going to get more or less complicated? More. Do you think we're going to have more benchmark values that we have to attain? More or less emphasis on value? And how many directions? Are we going to simplify our directions, or are we going to go to more directions? And what directions will we take? Together, we are all part of a healthcare relationship, collaboration, partnership journey. Now, whenever I rent a car, I rent Hertz Never Lost. Anybody ever rent a Hertz car with Never Lost? It is my favorite friend. It is kinder to me than my wife. If I miss an exit, my wife says, "You missed the exit, you dummy." Hertz Never Lost. Mrs. Magellan says, "Recalculating route." Wonderful. It would be nice if we all had a GPS director to show us which direction to go in this change. Change happens slowly, change happens abruptly, but we do not have that. A lot of times the change will bring us in a circular path, and we discover the process of change was not valuable just for the change it brought us, but in the pathway of knowledge that we picked up and the learning that we picked up as we become part of that change. But here's the question for you. Are we to be more or less connected in the future? See, what I see is that we have become so specialized in all the various, what I call the dots of healthcare. And there's so many of them, it's hard to keep track of all of them. But there's a new dot showing up any minute, every minute. And it's hard to connect with other dots of healthcare. Now, what I see most people do is connect in a linear way. That's all right. That's one way to do it, but that's not the best way. I think the solution to this fragmentation that we've all encountered, and through that fragmentation we all become weaker, the solution is something that can be seen on just about any admission orders to a hospital. Can you see my solution? Can you see it now? How about now? What do you see? What's MVI? There's my clinicians in the audience. MVI is multivitamins. Well, this is like a multivitamin. You see, a vitamin is a catalyst to the chemical reactions in our body that keep us alive. That's what a vitamin does. And in our healthcare system, of the dynamics of this ecosystem of healthcare we're all part of, MVI is how we will stay alive to catalyze the reactions that keep our healthcare system alive. MVI does not stand for multivitamins, but rather it stands for something different. MVI stands for mutual value integration. It's a way I discovered to keep the parts of healthcare connected in a more meaningful way. There are three components that's called HPI, which does not stand for history of present illness, but rather HPI stands for honoring the contribution of all those in healthcare to promote and pursue good business chemistry between each of the dots of healthcare, and also to honor the contribution and to also improve communication between those dots of healthcare. A payer might look at it this way. Of course, a hospital might look at it this way, or a staff member, or a healthcare business. My favorite model is the geocentric model of healthcare, where the physician is the center of the healthcare universe, and everyone else revolves around the physician. This is poorly understood, except by other physicians. I think the model should be a patient-centric model. We've always been patient-focused, but we haven't always been patient-centric. You see, if we can connect the patient with a hospital in a more meaningful way, that's good for both hospital and patient. But if we can also connect the payer to the patient in a more meaningful way, that's good for the patient and the payer, and healthcare businesses and staff and physicians. But if we can connect physicians to hospitals in a more meaningful, beneficial way, isn't that better for both hospital and physician as well as patient? And if we can connect all the dots of healthcare like this, you can see a complex matrix of this healthcare ecosystem that we're all part of develops, all in a patient-centric universe of healthcare. I think that's an idealized idea of what my dots of healthcare represent. I didn't give you my credentials. How do I get to talk on the healthcare ecosystem? Well, I'm an MD, FACS, CSP, CHCO, CHCC, which is way too many initials, so I condensed it. I'm an MD, FAC7, S2H2OP, which means I'm a doctor with some watered-down facts and a little P on the end. Those are my credentials. I got into this business by creating a documentation system to help me and my fellow physicians with E&M, evaluation and management coding. But what I discovered, there was a connection between E&M coding and DRG coding of hospitals. DRG coding, when linked to the E&M system, generated millions of dollars in increased revenue for client hospitals as well as client physicians as well. So I started connecting the dots early on until I realized that that was just a small segment of this ecosystem, and it more. But I want you to know who is really bringing you this program and my background and how I decided to become a business of healthcare speaker. Let me show you who really brought you this program. This is the guy that brought you the program. Underneath this suit, I am the most frustrated doctor you'd ever meet. This is who really brought you the program today. Not a guy in a suit, not a consultant, but rather someone that was so frustrated by the healthcare ecosystem, he decided to do something about it. It started off on compliance issues for me. And what I decided was I could whine and cry about how unfair medicine and the world of healthcare had become to me and my profession. But you know what I decided? The world don't care. I mean, I've got patients that'll drive 20 minutes out of their way to avoid a $5 copay. They don't care. Or I could understand the rules and understand the change of medicine and embrace those changes and figure out how to change my behavior to reflect the changing rules to change the way I do business. You see, as healthcare professionals, and we are all healthcare professionals, we have to understand we are not dummies. I mean, sure, we make mistakes. Sometimes we bury them, but we try not to repeat the same mistake. Clinical language. But not everybody speaks clinical language. You see, patients have language. Patients have patient language. Patient language translates to clinical language. Clinical language is then translated through an alphanumeric code. And this drives clinicians crazy. Because it always is, they're always trying to figure out which little neat compartment clinical things fit into, and from a clinician's perspective, there is no neat little compartment that it fits into. But the code is necessary because it speaks the other languages of healthcare all the clinicians don't speak. It speaks the language of regulation, the language of quality, and also financial language. And it's these language barriers that get in our way a lot of times when we're trying to communicate with other doctors of healthcare that do not understand the same common languages of healthcare. It takes a linguistic team effort in the hospital setting to have all these different elements, what I call the oil of the machine of healthcare. Imagine that healthcare in a hospital setting is an engine. Well, it's got pistons. Of course, that's the physicians, because we do all the work. The engine block is the hospital. But it's that thin little interface of oil that allows the pistons to smoothly work in the cylinder to create the product of what we do in healthcare. Everyone is essential in this network, in this complex of the ecosystem of healthcare. The different types of body language, too. In healthcare, size matters. I mean, as a big hospital, it takes a long time to create change. In a small office setting or a physician, we can change overnight. Time is measured differently from a clinician's perspective to an administrator's perspective. A clinician measures time in between beats of a heartbeat, while a hospital or a large institution of healthcare measures time today in 17-year spans, using a 100-year calendar. Now, it's gotten to the fact that the heat's on so high, I think we've pretty much thrown out strategic thinking because strategy will only last as long as the tactics. So I think we're pretty much focused on tactical thinking right now in healthcare. The rate of change is different from physician to a large institution. And, of course, activity and action. For a physician, we're always running to put out fires, but for an administrator, for someone in the upper echelons of healthcare management, it's a complex chess game where you realize that one move will affect other things, and as a physician, it's like we're playing a fast game of checkers. Paul Cilliers, an organizational guru, said people bring different data, perspectives, and different purposes to an effort, and we get upset because we disagree. It's not so much disagreement. It's a failure to understand each individual's perspective and purpose. Because at the end of the day, we are all helping patients, which is our job. Communication isn't enough. It's connectivity. It's understanding. That's what we need rather than just communication. HPI, Pursue and promote good business chemistry between all the dots of healthcare. When I look at the complicated system, I've simplified it to a degree. First, you have to start off with clinical excellence. And of course, that's flanked by good ethics and safety issues. On top of that, that's where you build the compassionate customer service that everyone and their brother seems to be chasing after now. But with quality measures, operational efficiencies, all these other components that come with part and parcel of this to drive satisfaction. Well, satisfaction isn't just patient satisfaction, rather it is also staff and physician satisfaction in a hospital setting, because when the staff is satisfied and the physicians are satisfied, only then can you sustain patient satisfaction, which everyone seems to be chasing. And of course, that drives value drives profit, and then profit drives a sustainable healthcare organization. That's my view of any business of healthcare. And we are all in the business of healthcare. Even the physicians who protest that it's not a client, it's not a customer, it's a patient.